The sun was a white hole in a bleached-out sky. It pressed down on the New Mexico territory, flattening the landscape into two dimensions, pale brown earth and pale blue air. Nothing moved except the heat, which shimmered up from the alkali flats, making the world look like it was melting. A woman was walking, or maybe she was just falling forward and catching herself. Her dress, once a decent calico, was ripped to gray rags. One of her bare feet was wrapped in a strip of it, a makeshift bandage that was dark with old blood. The other foot was raw. Dust caked her face, filling the lines of her exhaustion, clinging to the wet tracks of tears that had dried hours ago. She was following a wagon trail, a pair of ruts so old they seemed more like a scar on the land than a road. To her left, maybe a mile off, was the trading post. It was a dying place, a sagging adobe structure, a corral with two broken-down fences, and a dry stone hut that might have been a storehouse or a sick house. It didn't matter. It was shade. She stumbled, her ankle turning on a rock. A sharp, dry sob broke from her throat, but it made no sound, just a puff of dust from her cracked lips. She didn't have the water to make tears. She had been running for 3 days, or maybe 4. Time had smeared. She fell, not a stumble this time, but a full collapse. The gravel bit into her knees and palms. She tried to push herself up, but her arms buckled. She lay there, her cheek pressed to the hot, dry dirt, and waited. Waited for the sun to finish the job, or for the men who were hunting her to find her. At this point, she was not certain which was worse. That was when she heard it. Not the wind, not the cry of a hawk. It was the slow, steady creak of leather, the jingle of a spur, and the soft plod of a horse. She tensed. She squeezed her eyes shut. Playing dead. It was a trick that sometimes worked. Sometimes it just made them angry. The sound stopped. A shadow fell over her. "Ma'am?" The voice was low and rough as sanded wood. She didn't move. A long silence. She could feel him looking at her. She heard the heavy sigh of a man who had seen too much. Then, the sound of a boot hitting the dust. A hand, calloused and sun-darkened, touched her shoulder. She reacted like a sprung trap. She twisted, lashing out with a hand that had no strength, a hiss escaping her split lip. The man pulled his hand back, not in fear, but in patience. "Easy now. I ain't him." She tried to scramble backward, kicking up dust, but she only managed a few inches. Her eyes, wide with terror, finally focused on him. He was tall, wearing a brim-lowered hat that shadowed his face. He had a duster the color of the road, and a gun belt that hung low on his hips. He was just another man. They were all the same. "Get away," she whispered. The words tore at her throat. "I can't do that," he said. He knelt, not too close, holding his hands up where she could see them. "You're burning up. You need water." He was Jack, just Jack. He had been riding for 2 days, pushing north, trying to put 100 miles between him and a card game in Tucson that had gone bad. His horse, a Grula Mustang with a mean streak and endless stamina, shifted nervously behind him. He saw the woman, a heap of rags in the trail, and his first thought was ambush. His second thought, when he saw she was alone, was bait. His third, when he saw the state of her, was a deep, familiar ache. She stared at him, her body coiled, but the fight was leaving her. He could see it. Her eyes were glazed with sun sickness and exhaustion. He could see the dark, ugly bruises on her wrists, shaped like a man's fingers. He saw her lip, swollen and busted open. "I'm gonna pick you up," he said, his voice quiet, stating a fact. "I'm taking you to that hut, get you in the shade. No, don't touch me." He ignored her plea, moving with a quick, practiced motion. He hooked one arm under her back and the other under her knees. She weighed almost nothing. She gave a small, broken cry and tried to hit his shoulder, but her fist just bounced off the thick canvas of his coat. He carried her as if she were a sack of feed. Walking steady toward the dry stone hut, he kicked the rickety door open. It smelled inside, of packed earth, old straw, and the faint, sour scent of goats. But it was dark. It was cool. He laid her down on a pile of old burlap sacks in the corner. She immediately curled into a ball, her back to the room, facing the stone wall. She was shaking. Jack stood there for a moment, the light from the doorway carving a bright rectangle on the floor. He took off his hat, wiping his forearm across his sweaty brow. He went back outside to his horse, unhooked his canteen, and grabbed his saddlebags. When he came back in, she hadn't moved. He knelt beside her. "You got a drink?" She didn't answer. He put his hand on her shoulder again. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Water," he said. He uncapped the canteen and held it near her. The smell of the cool, metallic water hit her. Her body betrayed her. She turned, her eyes fixed on the canteen. He lifted her head gently and pressed the canteen to her lips. She drank like a dying animal, gulping and choking, water spilling down her chin and onto the rags of her dress. He let her drink for a few seconds, then pulled it away. She moaned, reaching for it. "Slow," he said, "or it'll come right back up." He let her have a little more, then capped it. He sat back on his heels, studying her. She was younger than he first thought. Under the dirt and the pain, maybe only 20. Her hair was a matted, tangled mess of brown. "Got some cuts on you," he said, more to himself than to her. He opened his saddlebags. He pulled out a small cloth, another flask, and a small tin of salve. He poured a little water from his canteen onto the cloth. When she saw him move toward her face with the wet cloth, she flinched back so hard her head hit the stones. "No, it's just water, just cleaning the dirt." He dabbed at her face. She hissed as the cloth touched her split lip, but she didn't fight. He was methodical. He cleaned the grime from her cheeks, her forehead, the caked blood from the corner of her mouth. Her skin underneath was pale, dotted with freckles. He took the other flask. "This'll sting. It's for the cut." He put a little whiskey on the rag and pressed it to her lip. She cried out, her whole body jerking. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I know. Almost done." He worked in silence. He cleaned her hands, his rough fingers gentle as he washed the gravel from her palms. He looked at her wrists, at the purple and black rings of old, violent bruises. He didn't say anything. He just pulled the sleeves of her torn dress down over them, as if hiding them would make them go away. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, hanging open. It offered no modesty, and she kept trying to pull the rags together with a shaking hand. Jack stood up. He unbuttoned his canvas duster. It was his only coat, worn thin at the elbows, stained with trail dust and old coffee. He folded it and laid it over her, covering her from her shoulders to her knees. It was heavy. It smelled of horse and sweat and the faint, clean smell of the sagebrush he'd been riding through. She stared up at him, her eyes wide. He was a stranger, and he had been more gentle with her than any man she had ever known. She didn't understand it. Kindness was a trap. It was always a trap. It was the thing they used before they hurt you. He finished his work and sat back against the opposite wall, giving her space. The hut was small, but he made himself smaller, pulling his knees up, resting his arms on them. The silence stretched. It was broken only by her ragged breathing. She watched him. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the floor, his hat in his hands, turning it by the brim. He looked tired as she felt. She had to break the silence. She had to know the terms. This was a trade. It was always a trade. He had given her water. He had given her shade. He had given her his coat. The debt was clear. She fumbled with the coat, pushing the heavy canvas off her shoulders. She sat up, wincing as her sore muscles protested. The movement made the torn dress fall open again. She didn't bother to cover herself. Her eyes, which had been so full of terror, now went flat, dull, lifeless. "Hurry up," she whispered. Jack's head snapped up. He looked at her, his brows pulling together in confusion. "What did you say?" "Hurry up," she said again, her voice a little louder, but just as dead. "And get it over with, before the other one comes." She pushed a tangle of matted hair from her face. It was mechanical, a transaction. She was a thing, a piece of meat, and she knew her purpose. She was offering the only currency she had. Jack stared at her. He saw the deadness in her eyes. He saw the way she didn't even see him, but was looking through him at the long, blurred line of men who had come before. A hot, sick anger rose in his chest. It wasn't for her. It was for the world that had done this to her. He stood up slowly. She flinched, expecting a blow or a caress. They were the same thing. He walked over to her. He didn't reach for her body. He picked up his coat from where it had fallen. He put it back over her, tucking it firmly around her shoulders. She looked at him, confused, her mouth slightly open. He knelt in front of her, so his eyes were level with hers. "You're worth more than just a night," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the small hut. She stared at him, and then she did something that surprised them both. She laughed. It was a terrible sound, dry, cracked, and full of disbelief. "You're a liar," she hissed. "Or you're a fool." She turned her face back to the wall. She didn't believe him. She couldn't afford to. She lay there, wrapped in his coat, and the smell of him. She tried to stay awake, to watch him, but the darkness in the hut, the coolness, and the sudden, shocking absence of fear pulled her down. As she drifted off, the memories she had been running from flooded in. It wasn't a nightmare. It was just her life. She was back in the mining town, at the Lucky Dog Saloon. It wasn't a saloon, not really. It was a line of wooden shacks, called cribs, behind the main bar. The smell. It was always the smell. Unwashed bodies, stale whiskey, the sharp, metallic tang of the iron ore that clung to every man who came down from the mine. She remembered the endless line of dirty hands, hands that grabbed and pinched and struck, hands with black under the nails, hands with thick calluses, hands with wedding rings. She remembered the sound of slamming doors. A door slamming shut was a beginning. A door slamming open was an end. Both sounds made her stomach clench. She remembered Silas, the man who ran the Lucky Dog. He had a gold tooth and a heavy hand. He liked to tell her she was his favorite. He liked to prove it by making her an example. One night, a client, a big Cornish miner who smelled of dynamite and sweat, had told her to do something. She had been slow to respond. Maybe she hadn't heard. Maybe she was just tired. He had hit her. A backhand first, that split her lip. And when she cried out, he had punched her in the side. 2 quick, hard jabs. She felt the sharp, blinding snap. Her ribs. She had fallen, unable to breathe. Silas had found her. He hadn't been angry at the miner. He had been angry at her. Damaged goods. May. He had snarled, kicking her. "You're costing me money." He'd locked her in a root cellar for 2 days with no food. That was when she knew. She would die here. She would die in this town, and be buried in a cheap pine box on the hill with the other girls. So she had run. She had taken the $20 from a drunk miner's trousers, stolen a loaf of bread from the kitchen, and run into the desert. She had run until her body gave out. Jack watched her sleep. It was a fitful, troubled sleep. She whimpered, her hands clenching and unclenching. He saw the terror on her face, even in her dreams. He needed to get supplies. Real food, maybe some clean bandages. The trading post was a risk, but it was the only place for 20 miles. He stood up and walked to the door. He looked back at her. She looked small in the shadows, a lost child. He pulled the door mostly shut, leaving it open just a crack, and went to see about the merchant. The trading post was run by a man named Alistair. He was a weasel of a man, with slicked down hair and a dirty apron. He was sitting on a stool behind his counter, picking his teeth. "Well," Alistair said, not getting up. "Look what the wind blew in. Jack, thought you'd be in Mexico by now." "Just passing through, Alistair," Jack said. He let his duster fall open, his hand resting near his gun. "Need some supplies. Jerky, a loaf of bread, some bandages." Alistair's eyes flickered to the hut across the way. "Just you? Or you traveling with that piece of merchandise I saw you carrying in?" Jack went very still. "What did you see?" "Oh, I see everything?" The merchant sneered. Saw her stumble in. Saw you play the hero. I know that one. That's May, one of Silas's girls from the Lucky Dog. He's got a reward out for her. $300. Says she stole from him." Alistair leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. 300? We could split it. You just keep her there. I'll send my boy to fetch the sheriff. Or better yet, Silas himself. Jack looked at the man. He looked at the greed in his little eyes. He thought of the woman in the hut. He thought of her busted lip and the deadness in her gaze. He didn't draw his gun. He didn't raise his voice. He just moved. In 1 second, he was across the small room, his left hand grabbing the front of Alistair's apron, twisting it, pulling him halfway over the counter. He slammed the man's head down onto the wood, not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to make his teeth rattle. "Listen to me," Jack whispered, his voice cold as a winter river. "You didn't see her. You didn't see me. She's not one of Silas's girls. She's my wife, and she's sick. I'm taking her to a doctor in Santa Fe." Alistair was trembling, his eyes wide. "Jack, I didn't mean—" "You're going to give me the supplies," Jack continued, his voice flat. "And you're going to give me a fresh horse for her to ride. And you're not going to charge me for any of it. You're going to do it because you're a good neighbor." He tightened his grip, cutting off the man's air. "And if I hear," he said, bringing his face close to the merchant's, "that you sent your boy, or that you said one word to Silas, I will come back, and I will burn this place to the ground with you inside it. Do you understand me?" He shook the man. Alistair nodded frantically, choking. Jack let him go. The merchant collapsed behind the counter, gasping. "The supplies," Jack said. 10 minutes later, Jack walked out with a sack full of food, bandages, and a small pouch of coffee. Alistair was already out in the corral, throwing a saddle on a sway-backed mare. The woman was awake. The first thing she felt was the panic. He was gone. Of course he was gone. He had taken what he wanted, or he had realized she was worthless and left her, or, worst of all, he was outside, talking to the merchant, getting the reward. She scrambled to her feet. The hut spun. She was dizzy, but the terror was stronger than the sickness. She had to run. She stumbled out of the hut, squinting into the brutal afternoon sun. He wasn't there. His horse was gone. She was alone. She saw his saddlebags, lying by the door where he'd left them. He had left his gear. A man didn't leave his gear. She looked inside. Food, water, bullets. She grabbed a handful of jerky and stuffed it in her mouth, chewing ravenously. Then she saw the locket. It was silver, tarnished, with a small, worn engraving of a rose. She opened it. Inside was a faded tintype, a woman, young, with kind eyes and a small smile. Not a woman from a saloon. A real woman, a sister, maybe, a wife. Under the locket was a folded newspaper. It was old, the creases worn through. She opened it. It was filled with wanted posters. Men wanted for cattle rustling, for train robbery, for horse theft. And then she saw his face. It was a bad drawing. But it was him. The same dark eyes. The same hard jaw. "Wanted, John T. Bishop, for murder. $1,000, dead or alive." She dropped the paper as if it were on fire. Murder. He was a killer. She heard a boot scrape on the gravel. She looked up. He was walking toward her, carrying a sack. He stopped when he saw her standing there, the newspaper at her feet, his locket in her hand. She didn't run. She backed into the hut. Her hand fumbled in his saddlebag, closing around the wooden handle of his skinning knife. He walked into the hut. The light from the door put him in silhouette. "Get back," she said. Her voice was a thin, trembling wire. She held the knife out, but her hand was shaking so badly she probably couldn't have hit him. Jack didn't stop. He walked slowly, setting the sack of supplies on the floor. He didn't react to the knife. He didn't seem surprised. He just looked tired. "I brought food," he said. "The merchant threw in a horse, a mare. She's not much, but she'll carry you." "I saw it," she whispered. "The paper. You're a killer." Jack nodded, as if she'd just commented on the weather. Sometimes. He took a step toward her. She pressed herself against the wall, the point of the knife wavering. "Stay back. I'll use it." "I know," he said. He stopped, just out of her reach. He reached into the sack he'd dropped and pulled out a small loaf of bread. He broke off a piece and held it out to her. "Eat," he said. She stared at the bread, her stomach cramped with hunger. "It's not poisoned," he said. He tore a piece off for himself and ate it. "Why?" she asked, the knife still held between them. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you were in the road," he said, "and you needed water. Now eat. We ride at first light." He didn't try to take the knife. He just stood there, holding out the bread, patient. Her arm was aching. The knife felt heavy. He was a murderer, but he had been kind. He had given her water. He had covered her with his coat. He had looked at her with something other than hunger. He was a murderer, and she was a whore. Maybe they were even... Slowly, her arm lowered. The knife clattered to the dirt floor. She snatched the bread from his hand and retreated to her corner, her back against the wall, watching him. She ate the bread like a wolf. He sat by the door, cleaning his gun, checking his bullets. The sun went down, and the desert turned cold. The wind picked up, howling around the corners of the small hut. It was a lonely, terrifying sound. Outside, in the dark, a pack of coyotes began to yip and cry. Jack built a small fire in the center of the hut, using the last of the merchant's kindling. The smoke escaped through a hole in the roof. The small blaze pushed the shadows into the corners and filled the hut with a flickering, orange warmth. She was shivering. The cold was seeping up from the ground. Through his coat, he was laying out his bedroll on the far side of the fire, as far from her as he could get. "Can I—" she started, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up. "Can I sleep near the fire?" He nodded, pushing his own bedroll back even further. "Go ahead. Take the warm spot." She crawled from her corner, pulling his coat tight around her. She lay down on the hard-packed earth, close to the flames, but not too close. She stared at the fire, at the way the wood cracked and spat. Jack lay down on his bedroll. He put his saddle under his head for a pillow, and then he did something that made her heart stop. He turned his back to her. His back. He was a wanted man, a killer, and he was in a room with a strange woman who had held a knife to him, and he was turning his back. He was showing her he was not a threat. He was making himself vulnerable to her. She lay there, watching the fire play over the back of his shirt. She was safe. For tonight, she was safe. She watched him until her eyelids grew heavy. She was still holding his locket. She closed her hand around the warm silver. Under the blanket, her hands, which had not stopped shaking for 4 days, were finally still. The fire had burned down to a pile of glowing orange embers, pulsing in the pre-dawn chill. Jack was already standing, his back to her, looking out the ruined doorway of the hut. He had his hat on. He was a man who seemed to be born with his hat on. She sat up. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her legs were stiff. Her back was a single column of pain, and her split lip throbbed with the cold. His heavy coat, which she had clutched all night, was a comforting weight. She did not want to give it back. "The horses are ready," he said, not turning. "There's coffee in the pot. If you want it, it's hot." She watched him. He had given her the fire, his coat, and his back. He had not slept. She was certain of it. He had watched, or he had listened. He had protected the camp. He had protected her. She folded his coat, her movements slow. She stood, ignoring the wave of dizziness, and walked to the door. She held the coat out to him. He turned, his eyes taking her in. She was still filthy, her hair matted, her dress a joke, but she had slept. Her eyes were not as wild. They were just empty. He took the coat from her, his fingers brushing hers. She pulled her hand back as if burned. He put the coat on, settling the familiar weight on his shoulders. "The mare's yours," he said, nodding toward the corral. "Alistair's best, which ain't saying much." She drank the coffee. It was black, bitter, and scalding hot. It felt like life. She ate the last piece of bread. "My name is May." The words hung in the silence. She offered them up, like the piece of bread he had given her. "A trade." Jack nodded. "Jack." He picked up his saddlebags and the sack of supplies. "Let's ride. We burn daylight." They rode out just as the sun cracked the horizon, spilling a thin, bloody light over the eastern ridges. The land was hard. It was not the green rolling country of stories. This was New Mexico territory, and it was a giant, sun-baked rock. They rode north, keeping the jagged line of the mountains to their west. The world was shades of brown, gray, and a dull, angry red. The ground was alkali white in the flats, cracked open like a dry mouth. Skeletal trees, mesquite and palo verde, clawed at the air. The only things that seemed to thrive were the cholla cactus, which looked like barbed wire, and the buzzards. They were always there, 2 or 3 circling high overhead, patient. They were a constant reminder that out here, death was not an event. It was a process, and it was always waiting. Jack rode his Grula Mustang, a horse that moved with a restless, powerful energy. He sat the saddle as if he were part of the animal. May was a different story. The mare was a sorry-looking bay with a dull coat and a low-hanging head. But it was strong enough. The problem was the rider. May rode with her shoulders hunched, her hands clenched on the reins, her body rigid. She had clearly been on a horse before, but she had not ridden. Not like this. They rode in silence for the first 2 hours. The only sound was the plodding of the hooves on the trail and the creak of old leather. Jack pulled his horse to a stop. May's mare, glad for the excuse, stopped on its own. "You're killing her, mouth," Jack said. May looked at him, her face already streaked with sweat and dust. "What?" "The reins. You're pulling them like you're trying to rip her teeth out. You're telling her to stop and go at the same time. She's confused, and you're going to make her mouth raw." May's face hardened. It was criticism. She knew what came after criticism. She loosened her grip, her knuckles white. "And you're bouncing," he said. "You're fighting the horse. Let the horse do the work. Move with her." He rode up beside her. He didn't touch her. He just showed her. "Like this. Your legs, that's where the grip is. Your hands, they just talk to the horse. You're screaming at her. You need to whisper." He kicked his horse into a trot. The Mustang moved off smooth. Jack just rose and fell. A perfect, easy motion. May kicked her mare. The horse, surprised, lurched into a jarring trot. May bounced high, grabbing for the saddle horn. Yanking the reins, the mare tossed its head, angry. "Don't grab the horn," Jack's voice called out, impatient. "You got no control if you're hanging on." She hated him. She hated the horse. She hated the sun that was already drilling into the top of her head. Her thighs were on fire. The insides of her knees were already rubbing raw. But she gritted her teeth, shoved her feet back into the stirrups, and forced her body to move with a god-awful rhythm. She would not complain. Complaining was weakness. Complaining got you hit. Silence was the only armor she had ever owned. They rode all day. He taught her. He was not a kind teacher. He was not cruel. He was practical. "Keep your heels down. She's gonna step in that hole if you don't guide her. Give her some water. She's not a machine." He watched her. She was a mess. She rode like a sack of corn, but she didn't whine. She didn't cry. When she nearly fell, she just cursed under her breath, a word he couldn't quite hear, then hauled herself back into the saddle. Her stubbornness was a surprise. It was a hard, brittle thing, born of desperation. He recognized it. It was the same thing that kept him riding. By late afternoon, she was moving better. Her body had given up fighting and just yielded. To the horse, to the heat, to the ache. They came over a high ridge. Below them, in a dip in the plain, was a small town. It was just a cluster of adobe buildings, a general store, a saloon, and a small building with a tin roof that glinted in the sun. On the front of that building was a sign, painted in stark black letters, Sheriff. May saw it. She reined in her horse so hard the mare stumbled. A sound came out of her, a small, choked gasp. Her eyes were fixed on that sign. She wasn't breathing. Jack was beside her in an instant. He didn't look at the town. He looked at her. "Easy, May, we're not going in." She was flinching. Her whole body was pulling away, as if she'd seen a rattlesnake coiling at her feet. She was back in the Lucky Dog, back in the office where Silas would meet with the sheriff. They'd drink whiskey. The sheriff would take his payment, a girl for the night, free of charge, to keep the peace. The law was not her friend. The law was just another customer. "We go around," Jack said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through her panic. "It's a long way around, but we don't need 'em." He turned his horse, heading west, into the broken land at the foot of the mountains. She took a ragged, shaky breath. She turned her mare and followed his dust. They found a spot to camp that night in a dry riverbed. A wash. It was sheltered from the wind by high, crumbling banks of red dirt. Jack built a small, smokeless fire of dead mesquite. It was a hotter fire, and it meant they were less likely to be seen. He handed her a piece of jerky and a biscuit from the sack. They ate in silence. The horses, watered from Jack's canteen and chewing on some dry grass he'd found, were a comforting, noisy presence in the dark. She watched him. He was cleaning his gun again. He was always doing something with his hands, cleaning his gun, checking the horse's hooves, sharpening his knife. He was never still. He was a sheriff, May said. Jack's hand stopped. He looked up. The firelight cut shadows into his face, making his eyes look like dark holes. "The man, the one who owned me. He was partners with the sheriff. In that town, not that one, another one. But they all looked the same." Jack didn't say anything. He just put the piece of his gun down and listened. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. She was staring into the fire. "His name is Silas. He told me I was a bad investment. Always sick, always looking sad. He said he had to protect his property." She took a breath. He bought me from a man in St. Louis who said my father owed him gambling money. I was 16. Silas paid $300 for me. He said that meant he owned me. For life. She was shaking now, but she didn't stop. The words were coming out, pulled from a place she kept locked. "One night, I tried to talk to a customer, to pay him to take me away. Silas found out. He said a man has to mark his property, so it don't get stolen." Her hand went to her hip, a reflexive, protective gesture, rubbing the spot through the thin fabric of her dress. He took the brand, the one they use for the cattle. He heated it in the fire and he said I owed him my body. He said I owed him for life. He said if I ever ran, he'd hunt me down and bring me back. He said the law would help him. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but the tears weren't falling. It was a dry, hot shame. Jack sat there for a long time. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. His face was a mask, carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she barely heard it. "He's wrong. He's got the law," she whispered. "He's got the brand." "I don't care if he's got the president," Jack said, his voice hard. "Men like that, men who buy and sell people, men who put their hands on a woman like that, they don't get to decide what anyone's worth is." He picked up his gun, his movements sharp, angry. She watched him. He wasn't disgusted. He wasn't looking at her like she was damaged goods. He was angry. For her. "You're a killer," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. "The poster, in your bag, in—" He nodded, not looking up from his work. "I am. Who? Does it matter?" "Yes," he sighed. He put the gun back together with a clean, metallic click. He laid it aside. "I worked for a man down near the border, a cattleman, big ranch, lots of money. His name was Thomas Grady. Only he didn't make his money on cattle. He made it on horses, Stolen horses. He stared into the fire. I was good with horses, better than I was with people. I'd ride into Mexico with a dozen head, sell 'em to the army down there, and ride back. Good money. Easy work. What happened? Grady was a cheat. He cheated his partners. He cheated the men who worked for him. One day, a man, a partner, came to collect what he was owed. Grady told me to handle it. Told me to run him off. Jack picked up a stick and pushed a log back into the fire. Sparks flew up into the dark. Things went south. The man didn't want to be run off. He had a gun. I had mine. He paused. Blood was spilled. Grady's partner, and one of Grady's own men. When the dust settled, Grady... He told the law I'd done it. Said I'd robbed him and killed his friends. He put the bounty on me. $1,000. Enough to make any man greedy. So you ran. I ran. I can't go back. Not to Texas, not to Arizona. And Grady's got a long reach. He looked at her. Their eyes met across the small fire. She was running from a brand. He was running from a bounty. Both of them were property. Both of them were worth a price. Dead or alive. So we're the same, she whispered. No, Jack said, his voice softening. No, May, we ain't. What you did to survive. What I did, that was just a job that went bad. The moon was rising. It was a thin, silver sliver, but it threw a surprising amount of light. It made the desert landscape look soft, almost beautiful. The air was cool and clean. They sat close, closer than last night. The fire was dying, and the warmth between them was a comfort. She could smell him, sage and horse and sweat. It wasn't the smell of the brothel. It wasn't iron and whiskey. It was clean. She didn't know what she wanted. She wanted to not be alone. She wanted to feel a hand on her that wasn't taking or hitting. She looked at his hand, resting on his knee. It was large, the knuckles scarred, the nails rimmed with dirt. It was the hand that had cleaned her face, the hand that had held out the bread. Slowly, her own hand, shaking, moved across the small space between them. She reached for his hand. Her fingers grazed his. The contact was electric. It was too much. She snatched her hand back, a sharp, choked breath escaping her. She pulled her knees up, hiding her face, her whole body trembling. Her eyes burned with sudden, hot tears. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, I can't. She wanted to be touched. She wanted it more than food, more than water. But not like that, not to be used. The two things were so tangled in her mind. She couldn't tell them apart. Jack didn't move. He didn't rush her. He didn't pull away. He just sat there, his presence a solid, warm thing in the dark. After a long moment, when her shaking had subsided, he moved, very slowly. She tensed. He didn't reach for her body. He didn't reach for her hand. He lifted his hand and gently, so gently, cupped her cheek. His thumb rested on her jawline. His palm was warm. His touch was calloused, but it held no threat. It just held her. He didn't try to kiss her. He just looked at her, his eyes clear in the moonlight. When you ask, he said, his voice a low rumble. When you ask with your whole heart, when you're sure, I'll answer. Until then, this is enough. He held her for a second more, then let his hand drop. He stood up. Get some sleep. I'll take the first watch. He turned and walked away from the fire, up to the bank of the wash, where he could see the plains. He became a shadow, a silhouette against the stars. May pulled her blanket tight. She lay down by the fire. She touched her cheek where his hand had been. It was the first time in her life a man's touch had felt like a promise, not a price. A half-mile away, on a high bluff, another man lay on his belly. He was not enjoying the moonlight. He was using it. He lowered the brass spyglass from his eye, a cruel, thin smile twisting his lips. He was a small man, wiry, with a face that looked like it had been left out in the sun too long. He had been tracking her for 2 days, ever since Alistair's boy had ridden into town, desperate to sell the information to someone other than Jack. This man had paid the boy $10 and promised him he'd tell Silas of his help. He had seen the camp. He had seen the two figures. He recognized the girl, May, and he recognized the man with her, John T. Bishop. $1,000 bounty, plus the $300 for the girl. This was a good day. But he was not a fool. Bishop had a reputation. He was not a man to be taken alone. The watcher smiled. He had seen them get close. He had seen the man touch her face. Pathetic. He didn't need to get them both. He just needed the girl. Silas wanted her back, and he wanted her, marked. The man crawled backward from the ledge, silent as a snake. He got to his horse, mounted up, and turned the horse. Not toward the camp, but back toward the town, back to get 4 more men, back to collect the debt. They rode for 2 days, pushing the horses, but not breaking them. Jack was careful, methodical, always watching their back trail, always checking the animals. On the 3rd morning, he turned them west, leaving the sparse trail they had been following and striking out into a vast, empty plain. "Where are we going?" May asked. Her voice was still rough, but the sun and the riding had put a little color in her face. "A place," he said. The place turned out to be a ranch, but it was unlike any ranch May had ever seen. It was not a sprawling, welcoming homestead. It was a fortress. It was tucked into a box canyon, the high rock walls providing a natural defense. The house itself was thick-walled adobe, with a high corral built of solid cottonwood logs. The main gate was heavy, reinforced with iron. As they approached, a figure appeared on the low roof of the house. It was not a man. It was a woman, holding a long rifle, and she held it like she knew how to use it. "That's far enough," her voice called out. It was a deep voice, weathered as old iron. Jack pulled his horse to a halt, holding one hand up, palm out. "Odessa, it's Jack! Jack Bishop!" There was a long silence. The rifle did not waver. "Heard you were dead. Jack Bishop. Heard Tom Grady put a price on your head so high it'd make a banker blush." "He did," Jack called back. "But I'm a poor investment. I'm just looking to water my horses and rest a day. I've got a companion." The woman on the roof shifted, her gaze moving to May. She looked at the girl for a long, hard moment. She saw the torn dress. She saw the raw, chapped skin. She saw the way May sat her horse, like a woman who had been beaten until she learned to fold herself up. "Companion, hell," the woman's voice grumbled. "That's trouble you're carrying? You brought it to my door. She's sick. Odessa, we won't stay long." Another silence. The rifle lowered. "Just a fraction. The girl, what's her name?" "May," Jack said. "May," Odessa called. "Are you running from a man?" May flinched. She looked at Jack, then back at the house. Her throat was dry. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. "Are you running from the law?" The law is his friend," May said, her voice a little stronger. Odessa grunted. The rifle disappeared. "The gate ain't locked, but the horse you're riding, girl, it's Alistair's. I know his brand. You steal it? He gave it to me," May said. "Jack? He owed me a favor. Jack said—" Odessa laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "I bet he did. Get in, and shut the gate behind you. I ain't running a public house." Odessa was an old black woman, tall and straight as a fence post. Her face was a beautiful map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and black and missing nothing. She met them at the door, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked May up and down. "You're the one," Odessa said. It wasn't a question. "The one they're all talking about, the one Silas wants back." May shrank. "You know him?" "I know of him," Odessa said, her voice full of contempt. "A man who deals in flesh. He's poison. And you," she said, turning her sharp gaze on Jack. "You're a wanted murderer. You two make a fine pair of stray dogs." She sighed, holding the door open. "Get inside. You look half-starved, both of you." The inside of the house was clean, cool, and smelled of wood smoke and herbs. It was a sanctuary. Odessa's ranch was a known secret on the fugitive trails. It was a stop for men running from a bad fight. for women running from a bad husband, for anyone who needed to disappear. Odessa asked no questions, and she offered no judgments, but she demanded one thing: no trouble. She gave them thick stew and fresh bread. May ate like she hadn't seen food in a year. Odessa watched her. "You're all bone, child. He feed you at all? He's been good," May said, looking at her bowl. Odessa looked at Jack. "Good, huh? That's a new one for you." She turned back to May. "You can have the back room. Jack can sleep in the barn. I don't trust a man with $1,000 bounty any further than I can throw him." "Yes, ma'am," Jack said, not arguing. "First," Odessa said, "the girl needs a bath and some clothes. You smell like the trail, and the trail smells like death." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, May was clean. Odessa had given her a small room with a real bed, a bar of lye soap, and a bucket of hot water. She had scrubbed her skin until it was red. She had washed the dust and blood from her hair. Odessa had burned her old dress, offering her a simple, sturdy work shirt and a pair of men's denim trousers, cinched tight with a rope belt. Dressed in the clean clothes, her wet hair hanging down her back, she felt different. She felt the weight of herself. The next morning, Odessa met her in the yard. The old woman was holding a shotgun. It was a big double-barreled scattergun, scarred and oiled. "What's that for?" May asked. "It's for you," Odessa said. She thrust the gun into May's hands. It was heavy. May almost dropped it. I don't know how." "Of course you don't," Odessa said, her voice sharp. "You're a victim. That's what he branded you as, a piece of property. Property don't need to know how to shoot. It just needs to lie still and take it." May's face flushed hot. "Are you property, child? Or are you a person?" "I'm a person." "Then learn to act like one. A person protects themselves." Odessa set up 3 tin cans on a fence post 50 yards away. "This is a shotgun. It ain't for aiming, not like a rifle. It's for persuading. It's for telling a man no, in a language he'll understand." She showed May how to break it open, how to load the heavy brass shells. She showed her how to brace it against her shoulder. "Hold it tight, tighter than that. You let it get loose, it'll break your collarbone. You respect the gun, and it'll respect you." May was clumsy. She was afraid. The gun was a loud, violent thing. "Pull the hammer," Odessa commanded. "Aim for the middle can." May sighted down the long barrel. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening. The kick was a brutal, violent punch that sent her staggering backward, landing hard in the dust. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire. The shotgun clattered to the ground. The cans were untouched. "You close your eyes," Odessa said, her voice flat. "You're already dead. You think the man hunting you is going to let you miss? You think he's going to wait for you to cry?" May's shoulder was throbbing. Tears of pain and frustration welled in her eyes. "I can't," she cried. "Yes, you can." Odessa said, "Get up, pick it up, load it, and this time, you keep your damn eyes open." She was a harsh teacher. For 2 days, May felt like she was in hell. Her shoulder turned a deep, dark purple, a new bruise to match the old ones. Her ears rang. Her hands were clumsy with the shells. She missed, and she missed, and she missed. On the 3rd day, something changed. She was tired of the noise. She was tired of the pain. But most of all, she was tired of being afraid. She loaded the gun. She braced it. She kept her eyes open. She saw the man's face. Not the can, Silas. She saw his sneer. She pulled the trigger. The boom was the same. The kick was the same. But this time, it was followed by a beautiful, satisfying clang. The middle can spun off the fence post, obliterated. May stood there, the smell of gunpowder in her nose, her shoulder aching. A slow smile spread across her face. Odessa grunted. "You missed the other 2. Load it again." Jack watched her in secret. He was in the barn, pretending to mend a piece of tackle Odessa had given him. He had seen the whole thing. He had watched her fall. He had watched her cry. And he had watched her get up, over and over. He saw the new bruise forming on her shoulder, and he had seen the smile. A wave of admiration washed over him, so strong it almost buckled his knees. She was strong. She was stronger than he was, and the admiration was followed by a cold, black guilt. He wanted her. He had wanted her since he saw her stand up to him with that knife. He wanted her in a way that had nothing to do with what she'd offered in the hut. He wanted her to be whole. He wanted to be the man who sat with her by the fire, but he was tainted. He was John T. Bishop, wanted for murder. His past was a plague. He brought death and trouble. He had brought it to Odessa's door. He was bringing it to May, this new fragile strength she was building. He was going to be the one to shatter it. The men hunting her were one thing. The men hunting him were another. And when they found him, they would destroy her just for being near him. He looked at his hands, the hands that had held a gun and spilled blood. He had no right to touch her. He had no right to even look at her. He was a fool to think he could be anything other than what he was. A man on the run, one step ahead of a rope. That night, the third night, the air in the small room was thick. They had fallen into a routine. Odessa had given them the room in the house, a gesture of trust, or perhaps just a way to keep an eye on them. It had a real bed, with a thick quilt. May slept in the bed. Jack slept on the floor, by the door, with his gun belt beside him. But tonight, neither of them was sleeping. A cool breeze came through the open window. May was clean. She smelled of lye soap and the clean cotton of Odessa's borrowed shirt. She had been lying in the bed for an hour, listening to the sound of Jack's breathing in the dark. She was not the girl in the dust. She was not the girl in the brothel. She was the woman who had hit the can. She had made a choice in the yard. Now, she was going to make another. She sat up. The quilt rustled. In the dark, Jack's breathing stopped. He was instantly awake. "What is it? You hear something?" "No," she said. Her voice was quiet. "It's nothing." She swung her legs out of the bed. The floorboards were cool under her bare feet. He was a shadow, sitting up on his bedroll, his hand already on his gun. "Jack," she said. He saw her stand up. She was a pale shape in the moonlight coming through the window. She crossed the small room. He tensed. "May, what is it?" She stopped in front of him, so close her knees almost touched his shoulder. He looked up at her. He could see the faint outline of her face, her eyes. She was trembling, but it was not fear. It was resolve. She bent down. She took his large, calloused hand, the one that was not on the gun. He let her. He didn't know what else to do. She stood, pulling his hand with her. She did not pull him to the bed. She just stood, holding his hand. She lifted it. She pressed his palm against her waist, over the clean, coarse fabric of the shirt. Her skin was warm beneath it. His hand was so large, it covered her hip. "Don't wait," she whispered. His breath hitched. He felt the jolt of her touch all the way to his boots. He looked up at her face. Now, just inches from his, he could see her eyes, wide and clear in the moonlight. They were not dead. They were not afraid. They were asking. "May," he breathed, his voice rough. "Are you sure? This ain't a trade." "I know," she said. "It's not. It's mine. I'm choosing." He stood up slowly. He was taller than her. He was shaking. He, who had faced down men with guns, was trembling before this woman. He was afraid of his own past. He was afraid of his own desire. He was afraid he would break this new, strong thing in front of him. "You're worth more," he started. "The old words." "I know," she said, stopping him. "You told me. Now I believe you." He reached up, his hand unsteady, and pushed the clean, damp hair back from her face. His fingers brushed her cheek, her neck. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. He breathed in, hard. He smelled the soap on her skin. He leaned down. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not a kiss of hunger. It was a kiss of discovery. It was slow. It was hesitant. It was her lips, chapped and soft against his. rough and dry. It was a question and an answer. He kissed her like she was the first thing he had ever truly seen. He kissed her like he was afraid she would break. She responded, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She was not passive. She was not a victim. She was kissing him back. A long, aching sound came from the back of his throat. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. He could feel her heart beating against his. He picked her up, his arms strong, and carried her the 2 steps to the bed. Their first night together was not a storm. It was not the frantic, desperate coupling of the brothel. It was quiet. It was slow. It was reverent. It was 2 broken, lost people, clinging to each other in the dark, trying to find a piece of themselves in the other. It was an ache so deep it felt like a prayer. It was not rushed. It was a long, slow unfolding. It was about the touch of his hand on her back, her fingers in his hair. It was about the absence of fear. And in the deep, quiet hours of the night, it was, finally, enough. May woke first. The room was filled with the gray light of pre-dawn. For a long, confused moment, she didn't know where she was. This was not the crib. This was not the dirt. She was warm. She was held. Jack was asleep beside her. He was on his back, his arm draped protectively over her waist, his hand resting on her hip, the very spot she had told him about. He was guarding it, even in his sleep. She looked at him. In sleep, his face was younger. The hard lines around his mouth were gone. He looked peaceful. She slid out from under his arm, careful not to wake him. She wrapped the quilt around her shoulders, the fabric soft and warm. She went to the window. The sun was just beginning to rise. It was painting the underside of the clouds in impossible, blazing colors of pink and fire orange. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She held up her hand in the new, clean light. It was perfectly steady. She heard footsteps in the hall. Odessa. Jack was awake. He was sitting up in the bed, his gun in his hand, his eyes on the door. He was the man on the run again. The footsteps passed. He let out his breath. He looked at May, at her back, at the quilt, at the sunrise. A look of profound confusion and tenderness crossed his face. He found Odessa in the kitchen. The big wood-fired stove was already going. The smell of coffee was thick in the air. Odessa didn't look up from the bacon she was frying. Sleep well, Jack Bishop? Jack flushed. Odessa, Save it, she said. I ain't her keeper, and I ain't yours. She slid the bacon onto a plate and looked at him. Her eyes were hard. They passed through. Jack went cold. Who? 4 men? Yesterday. While you 2 were occupied. She spat the word. Hard men, armed, asked for water, asked for news, said they were trackers, U.S. Marshals. Marshals? They lied. Odessa said, A real lawman's got a look. These men, they just looked hungry. They asked about a girl, runaway from the lucky dog, said she had a broken tooth, and a brand. She held his gaze. I told 'em I'd seen no one. They didn't believe me. I saw 'em looking at the tracks you 2 left. They rode out this morning, heading south, toward the border, but they're smart. They're circling. They'll be back. Jack's blood was ice. 4 men. We have to go, now. He ran back to the room. May was there, dressed in the trousers and shirt. She was packing. She was folding the blanket he had used on the floor. Odessa just told me, he said, his voice clipped. He was grabbing his saddlebags, shoving his gear inside. 4 men, they're hunting you. We have to ride. We'll head west, into the Gila. Lose 'em in the mountains. He was in a panic. He was the man on the run. He was pulling her back into his world. No, he stopped. His hands were full of bullets. What? No, she said again. Her voice was quiet, but it was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of the woman who had hit the can. I'm done running. Jack, I've been running my whole life. From my father, from Silas, from every man who looked at me. Now, I'm running from them. She walked over to him. She put her hand on his arm, on the tense muscle I want to stop being prey. He looked at her. He saw the woman from the sunrise, not the girl from the trail. She was not going to run. He let out his breath, a slow, ragged sound. He nodded. All right, not running, but we're not fighting them here. We're not bringing this down on Odessa. He thought for a moment, his mind racing. Apache Mesa. It's 2 days north. Rough country. Dangerous. The army's got a truce, but it's a thin one. No bounty hunter will follow us in there unless he's a fool or has a death wish. It'll buy us time. Time for what? Time to get to Santa Fe. I know. I knew a man once. A judge. He hates the syndicates. He hates men like Silas. He might help. It was a plan. It was a thin one, but it was better than running. They packed. It was fast. Odessa met them at the door. She had a sack full of jerky, hardtack, and a full water skin. She also had 2 boxes of shotgun shells. She pressed them into May's hand. Don't you miss child? She said. May looked at the old woman, this stranger who had been harsher and kinder to her than anyone in her life. She nodded. I won't. Odessa looked at Jack. You keep her safe. Jack Bishop, you hear me? You brought her here. You see her through. I will, he said. They rode hard. They rode north toward the high, jagged cliffs that rose from the desert floor like a broken wall. The horses were fresh, and the fear gave them speed. The landscape changed, growing more rugged. The flat plains gave way to canyons and rising, blood-red rocks. As the sun began to set on the first day's ride, the great flat top of Apache Mesa loomed in the distance. Purple in the fading light, May rode up beside him. The wind pulled at her hair, which she had tied back with a piece of rawhide. May, she said, her voice loud over the sound of the hooves. That's the name Silas gave me, the name he put on his books, the name he branded. Jack looked at her, slowing his horse to a trot. My name, she said, and her voice was clear and strong, a different voice than he had ever heard. My real name, the one my mother gave me. It's Marianne. He looked at her. Marianne. It suited her. It was a name with weight, a name a person could build a life on. He nodded. Marianne, it's a good name. They kicked the horses, riding on, faster, toward the dangerous hope of the mesa. Apache Mesa was not a refuge. It was a fortress of stone, and it did not welcome them. It rose from the desert floor like a broken, angry god, a flat-topped mountain of sheer red cliffs. The trail Jack followed was not a trail at all, but a narrow, winding game path, a crack in the rock that only a desperate man would take. They rode their horses as far as they could, the animals' sides heaving, their iron-shod hooves slipping on the smooth stone. The air was thinner here, and the silence was absolute. It was a dead, ancient silence. They passed under a high overhang, and the rock was covered in paintings, ancient petroglyphs, red and yellow stick figures hunting, dancing, dying. The eyes of 1,000 ghosts watched them pass. We'll have to lead them from here, Jack said. His voice hushed, as if he were in a church. He dismounted, his movements stiff. They were walking. Jack leading his Mustang, Marianne right behind him with the mare. When the sound came, it was not a loud sound. It was a sharp crack that echoed, instantly multiplied by the canyon walls. So it seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was followed by a sound like a wet, angry wasp. Thwack! Jack grunted. A sharp, punched-out sound. He stumbled, his hand flying to his left arm, just above the elbow. He was spun half around, slamming into the rock wall. Jack! Marianne screamed. Sniper! He yelled. He grabbed the front of her shirt with his good hand and threw her to the ground, behind a cluster of boulders. Stay down! Don't move! Another shot cracked. The bullet sparked off the rock just above Marianne's head, spraying her with stone fragments. She screamed, burying her face in the gravel. Jack, his face white with pain, had his revolver out. He was pressed flat against the canyon wall, his eyes scanning the rim high above them. He could see nothing, just the red rock and the empty blue sky. The horses, he grunted, looking at the animals, who were dancing in terror. We lose them. We die. He was bleeding. A dark, steady stream was running from under his hand, painting his sleeve a bright, slick red. "How many?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "One. A rifle. He's high. He's got the advantage. We're pinned." He looked at the path ahead. 20 yards. 20 yards of open, exposed trail before it bent around the cliff face and into shadow. "I'm going to draw his fire," Jack said, his voice tight. "When he shoots, you run. Run for that bend. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run. Take the horses. Go!" "No, I won't leave you." "You're not," he yelled, the pain making him angry. "You're saving the horses. Now do it!" He didn't wait for her answer. He took a deep breath, his knuckles white on the grip of his gun. "Now!" He lunged out from behind the boulder, firing his revolver up at the rim. The sound was deafening in the narrow space. He was a target, a moving, firing target. The crack of the rifle came again. The bullet kicked up dust at Jack's feet. A miss. The sniper had been waiting, but Jack was too fast. "Go! Go!" Jack roared. Marianne did not run. She grabbed the reins of both terrified horses, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold them. She hauled on them, dragging them, forcing them into the open space. She was not a victim. She was a partner. Jack was already moving, running low, back to the cover of the bend. He grabbed the reins of his Mustang from her, his good hand of ice. "Get in," he hissed. "Into the shadow. Keep going." They ran, scrambling over the rocks, dragging the horses, who were wild-eyed and pulling back. They rounded the bend into a deep, narrow fissure in the rock. The walls rose 500 feet on either side, and the sky was just a thin blue ribbon above. They were safe. For a moment, Jack slumped against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His left arm was useless. The front of his shirt was soaked. "Oh, God!" Marianne whispered. She saw the blood. It was everywhere. It's just the arm," Jack panted, fighting the gray void that was swimming in his vision. Hit the muscle. Went clean through. We have to stop the bleeding." He looked at her, a strange, grim smile on his face. "Knew you'd be useful." He pushed himself off the wall. "There's a place. I saw it when I was here before. A cave, not far." He led them. He was staggering now, the shock setting in. He held his arm tight to his body, and with every step, a fresh gush of blood pulsed through his fingers. It was 100 yards. It felt like a mile. He stopped at a place that looked like a dead end, just a wall of rock covered in brush. He pushed aside the curtain of dry, dead vines. A dark opening. A cave. It was shallow, no more than 20 feet deep, but it was dry, and the floor was covered in soft sand. It was hidden. It was shelter. Get the horses inside," he whispered. "The brush. Cover the opening." She did it. Her hands were shaking, but she was fast. She pushed the reluctant animals into the dark. She pulled the vines back, arranging them. From the trail, it looked like nothing. When she turned, Jack was on the ground. He had passed out. "Jack!" Her panic was a cold, sharp thing. She ran to him, dropping to her knees in the sand. His face was a waxy, pale gray. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "No, you're not allowed." She remembered Odessa. She remembered the wound. She had to stop the bleeding. She tore at his sleeve, the blood-soaked fabric ripping in her hands. The wound was ugly. A ragged hole on one side of his arm, a bigger, torn exit wound on the other. It was pumping, a slow, terrifying rhythm. She ran to the saddlebags, her mind sharp with terror. She found his whiskey flask, his knife, and the small sewing kit Odessa had given her. Thread, a needle. She did not think. She just acted. She poured the whiskey over the wound. Jack's body arched off the ground with a silent, strangled scream. His eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. He tried to fight her. "Hold still," she yelled, her hands on his chest, pushing him down. "It's me. It's Marianne. I have to. It's for the poison." He stared at her, his eyes finding her face, the pain making him a stranger. "It hurts." I know, she whispered, her own tears blurring her vision. I know. She took the needle. She threaded it. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely do it. Hold this, she said, pressing the whiskey flask into his good hand. Bite it. He did. He bit down on the metal. She put the needle to his skin. It was the most intimate thing she had ever done. It was more intimate than the night before. This was not love. This was life. She stitched his flesh. Her breath was hot and fast in the small, dark cave. She could smell the iron of his blood, the sour tang of the whiskey, the salt of his sweat. He grunted and groaned against the flask, his body rigid, but he did not pull away. She worked. She was clumsy. The stitches were too big, but she closed the wound. She pulled the torn flesh back together. She bandaged it with strips of cloth torn from her own shirt. When she was done, she collapsed, her hands covered in his blood. He was pale. He was sweating, but he was breathing. The bleeding had stopped. He spat the flask out. You're good at that, he whispered. I'm not, she said, her voice ragged. It's a mess. It's good enough. They stayed in the cave as the sun moved across the sky. They listened. The silence of the mesa had returned. The sniper was gone, or he was waiting. As dusk filled the cave, turning the shadows from gray to black, Jack shivered. The fever was setting in. She sat beside him, giving him small sips of water. She covered him with his bedroll. They'll be back, he whispered from the dark. The trackers. They won't find us here. They will. Men like that. They can track a ghost over rock. Odessa's tricks. They only bought us a day, maybe 2. She said nothing. She knew he was right. The cold, hard knot of fear was back in her stomach. I lied to you, he said. She went still. What? In the wash. When I told you about Grady, about the horse thieving. It was true. All of it. But it wasn't. It wasn't the whole truth. He turned his head on the saddle he was using as a pillow. He looked at her, his eyes dark with fever and memory. The wanted poster. For murder. It's true, too, but it wasn't Grady's partner. She waited. I had a sister, he said, his voice flat and dead. Her name is Sarah. She was younger than me, pretty, always laughing. He closed his eyes. I was wild, always running off, doing jobs like the one for Grady. I was never home. I was in Mexico when a man came to our town. A gambler, smooth. He had money, and he liked Sarah. He hurt her. He didn't do what they did to you. He just broke her. He used her up and left her in debt, left her ruined. His voice broke. He stopped. She took laudanum, a whole bottle. Marianne's hand went to her mouth. I came home, Jack continued, his voice a rasp. I came home for the funeral. I saw her, in the box. She wasn't laughing. I found him, the gambler. He was in a saloon in Tucson. He was laughing. He was playing cards. I walked in. I called his name. He stood up. He went for his gun. I was faster. He opened his eyes. They were burning. I shot him 3 times. I killed him, in front of 20 men. And it didn't change a thing. It didn't bring her back. It didn't fix her. She was still dead. He looked away, at the dark wall of the cave. That's who I am. Marianne, I'm not some hero from a story. I'm just a man who's been running ever since. Running from a rope. Running from her. From the fact that I wasn't there. He was quiet. The only sound was his ragged breathing. Marianne looked at this man who had saved her, this man who had killed for his sister, this man who was drowning in a guilt she understood all too well. She moved. She slid closer to him, onto the bedroll. She was careful of his arm. She lay down beside him, her body pressed against his. She put her hand on his chest, on his heart. She could feel it beating, a frantic, unsteady rhythm. Then stop running, she whispered. His breath caught. He looked at her. "You ran," she said, her voice fierce but soft. "You ran for her. Now, you're running for me, and I'm telling you to stop. I'm tired of running." He didn't say anything. He just broke. A sound, a terrible, dry sob, was ripped from his chest. He turned his head into her shoulder, his good arm coming around her, pulling her so tight she could barely breathe. He clung to her, like a man drowning, like driftwood in a storm. And she held him. She held this killer, this broken, good man. And she did not run. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in the dark, a feverish, desperate sleep. But the nightmares always came back. Marianne woke with a gasp. She was choking. Her own scream was trapped in her throat. She was back in the dust. The sun was burning her. She was collapsing, and Jack was on his horse, looking down at her. He had her locket. He was tossing it to the ground beside her. "You're not worth it," his voice said. "You're just a whore from a mining town." He was turning his horse. He was leaving her. He was leaving her behind in the dust. "No!" she screamed, the word finally tearing free. She sat bolt upright, her heart hammering against her ribs, the dark of the cave pressing in. Hey, I'm here." Jack was awake. He was holding her. His good hand was on her back. His other arm, the wounded one, was weak, but it was around her. "I'm here. It was a dream. You're safe. You left me," she sobbed, clinging to him, her nails digging into his skin. "You left me in the dust." "Never," he whispered, his voice rough. "Never. I'm not leaving you. Do you hear me, Marianne? I'm right here." He held her, rocking her, as she cried. He held her as the terror of the dream faded, replaced by the reality of the man beside her. But the fear was still there, and the hunters were still out there, and the fever was still in him. She looked at him, her eyes adjusting to the dark. "You're burning up," she whispered. "I'm fine. You're a bad liar, Jack Bishop." She got up, found the water skin. She made him drink. She wet a cloth and pressed it to his forehead. He watched her, his eyes too bright in the dark. He caught her hand, the one holding the cloth. He pulled it to his lips. He kissed her palm. A different kind of fire sparked. It was not the reverent, slow discovery of Odessa's ranch. This was something else. This was the terror of the nightmare. This was the fever. This was the confession. This was the man with the rifle, still out there in the dark. This was desperate. She leaned down. She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was raw. It was intense. It was a claiming. It was, "I am alive, and so are you." He pulled her down onto the bedroll. His good arm was iron. His wounded arm was fire. He kissed her like he was trying to breathe her in. He was a man dying of thirst, and she was water. They made love. It was a frantic, clumsy, desperate act. It was a fight against the dark. It was a promise in the face of death. It was two people, their bodies slick with sweat and his blood, saying the only thing that mattered, "We are not dead yet." When it was over, they lay in a heap, their breathing ragged, their bodies tangled. "Santa Fe," he panted, his voice hoarse. "The plan! It's still the plan!" "The judge," she whispered, her head on his chest. "Judge Herrera, Odessa's friend, he owes me. I helped him once, with a problem. He hates the syndicates, the ones who run men like Silas, the ones who buy the law. He's the only one who might nullify the bounty, who might see the brand for what it is." An investigation," she said, remembering. "Yeah, he's got friends. In the territorial government. If we can get to him, if we can just get to Santa Fe, we have a chance." "When?" "Tomorrow. At dawn. We can't stay here. The sniper, he's one of them. He'll go back. Tell them where we are. They'll come in force. We have to be gone. They left at dawn. They left the safety of the cave and rode out into the canyons of the mesa. The horses were nervous, sensing the danger. Jack was weak. He was pale, but he was in the saddle. He rode with his gun in his hand. Marianne rode beside him. The shotgun was in her lap. She had loaded it. She had not closed her eyes. They were in a narrow, high-walled canyon, a shortcut to the north side of the mesa. The silence was thick, too thick. "Ambush," Jack whispered. It was too late. A man stepped out from the rocks, 30 yards ahead. He had a rifle. "That's far enough, Bishop," he called. Another man appeared on the ridge above them, and a third behind them, cutting off their retreat. They were the men from Odessa's, the trackers. "Silas wants the girl," the man in front said. He was a small, wiry man with a face like a weasel. "And Grady, he wants you. We'll take you both, dead or alive. Makes no mind to us." "Go to hell," Jack spat. He kicked his horse, pulling it sideways, firing his revolver. The canyon exploded with sound. The man on the ridge fired. The bullet sang past Jack's ear. Marianne screamed, pulling her mare behind a tall rock. Jack fired again. He was a blur of motion, even wounded. His first shot missed. His second took the man in front in the chest. The man crumpled. The tracker on the ridge fired again. The bullet hit Jack's saddle. A heavy, dull thud. Jack turned, firing up. He hit the man. The tracker screamed, grabbed his shoulder, and fell from the ridge, disappearing from view. "One more," Jack yelled, reining in his horse, which was plunging in terror. "The one behind us!" A shot came from behind. It was not a miss. The bullet tore through the cantle of Jack's saddle, grazing his thigh. A line of fire. "Gah!" he yelled, grabbing for the horn. He was hit. Again. He was losing his balance. The third tracker stepped out from the rocks. He was raising his rifle, taking careful aim at Jack's back. He was 10 yards away. "Jack!" Marianne screamed. There was no time. She raised the shotgun. She didn't aim. She persuaded. She kept her eyes open. She saw Silas. She pulled both triggers. The boom of the shotgun was a physical thing. It was a roar that filled the world. The kick was a monster, a brutal punch that almost knocked her from the saddle. But the man behind Jack disappeared. He was just gone. A red mist in the air. He was thrown backward, off his feet, his rifle flying. Silence. The only sound was the echo, rolling down the canyon. Jack stared, his gun smoking, his leg burning. He looked at Marianne. She was sitting on her horse, her face white, her eyes wide, the shotgun still smoking in her hands. A fourth man, the sniper, the one who had gotten away, scrambled out from the rocks. He looked at the man Jack had shot. He looked at the mess Marianne had made. He looked at Jack. He dropped his rifle. He ran. He scrambled up the rocks and disappeared, wounded and terrified. One escaped. Jack rode over to her. He was bleeding, again, but he was smiling. A grim, pained, proud smile. "You're getting the hang of that," he said. Marianne looked at the man she'd killed. She dropped the shotgun. And she was, very slowly, sick over the side of her horse. They rode into Santa Fe on a wave of fever and desperation. The journey from Apache Mesa had been a blur of pain for Jack. The second wound, the graze on his thigh, was festering. The arm Marianne had stitched was a hot, swollen mass of angry flesh. He was a dead weight in the saddle, barely conscious. His body slumped. Marianne was the one who got them there. She had become the hunter, the nurse, the will. She had used the last of their water to clean his wounds. She had shot a rabbit with the shotgun, the noise echoing her own heartbeat, and cooked it over a tiny fire. She had fed him broth, forcing it between his lips. She had ridden for 2 days with him, a ghost, beside her, holding his horse's reins, pulling him toward a city that was their last, thin hope. Santa Fe was not a town, it was a city. It rose from the brown plains, a sprawling maze of old adobe, grand Spanish churches, and new brick buildings. It was alive. The streets were cobbled, not just ruts of mud. Lanterns were strung over the main plaza, waiting for dusk. The air smelled of pinon smoke, fresh bread from a bakery, and the sharp, clean scent of high desert air. But under the civilization, there was a current. Men in dark suits with watchful eyes stood outside the bank. Lawmen with shiny badges walked with a swagger, but their eyes were cold. Marianne, dressed in her borrowed men's trousers and shirt, her hair a wild tangle, with a wounded man beside her, was an immediate and unwelcome target of attention. She ignored the stares. She found the livery, paid for the horses with the last of the money Odessa had given them, a few precious silver dollars. She half-dragged, half-carried Jack, who was delirious, his eyes glassy. "Judge Herrera," she said to the liveryman, her voice hoarse. "Where do I find him?" The man looked at Jack, at the bloodstain on his trousers, and spit. "Don't want no trouble, ma'am." "We're not trouble," she said, her hand resting on the stock of the shotgun, which she had not let go. "We're family. My husband is sick. The judge is an old friend from back east." The man looked at the shotgun, at the hard, cold desperation in her eyes. This was not a woman to be argued with. He nodded. "Palace Avenue, 2-story brick building. Got a sign. You can't miss it." Judge Herrera's office was small, cluttered, and smelled of old paper, stale cigar smoke, and dust. The man behind the desk matched the room. He was older, his hair a thin gray, his face a web of deep lines. He wore a string tie and a vest that was missing a button. He was not a grand, powerful man. He was a weary one. "I'm not seeing anyone," he said, not looking up from the brief he was reading. "We were told you were a friend of Odessa's," Marianne said. The pen in the judge's hand stopped. He looked up. His eyes, once dull, were now sharp. He looked at Marianne. He looked at Jack, who was slumped in a chair by the door, his head against the wall, his eyes closed. "Odessa," he said. He stood up. He walked over, looked at Jack. He saw the fever. He saw the crude stitches in his arm, the blood-soaked bandage on his thigh. "This is not a social call, and this man is not sick. He's been shot, twice, by the look of it." "He needs a doctor," Marianne pleaded. "He needs a doctor. He needs an undertaker, or he needs the law," Herrera said, his voice curt. "Odessa sends me problems. She does not send me friends. Who is he?" "Jack Bishop," Jack whispered, his eyes cracking open. The name fell into the room like a stone. Herrera's face went blank. "John T. Bishop, the $1,000 bounty. Grady's man. So, Odessa has sent me a murderer. And you, child, who are you?" "I'm the one they're hunting," Marianne said. "My name is Marianne, and I am running from a man named Silas, from the Lucky Dog Saloon." At the name Silas, Herrera's weary expression darkened into something else. Anger. "Silas," he repeated. "So, the cartel is cleaning house." He went to his door, locked it. He went to his window, pulled the shade. The room was suddenly dark, lit only by a single desk lamp. "You have brought a war to my office, child," he said. "Silas is not just some brothel keeper. He is a partner in the Santa Rita Silver Cartel. They own the mines, they own the towns, they own the law in that part of the territory. They buy sheriffs like I buy cigars. You," he said, pointing at Marianne, "are not a runaway. You are a witness, a loose end. They branded me," Marianne said, her voice low. Herrera stopped. "What?" "They branded me on my hip, like a cow. He said I was his property. For life." The judge sat down heavily. He looked at Jack, then at Marianne. "And you shot up his men. Odessa got a rider to me. She told me what to expect. 4 men? You killed 3. 1 got away." "He was a sniper," Jack managed to say, his voice a dry rasp. "And he will be back," Herrera said. "You 2 are not just hunted. You are a liability. Silas cannot have a branded girl walking around, and the cartel cannot have a man like Bishop, who they failed to kill, talking to a man like me. You are dangerous. You are protected. Protected? Marianne asked, confused. Silas is, Herrera clarified. By money, by power, by guns. You are just targets. He rubbed his face. I can't help you, not officially. If I take you in, my name goes on a list, and I will be dead in a week, and so will you. Then what do we do? Marianne asked. Herrera looked at Jack, who was fading fast. First, he needs a doctor, not a hospital, a doctor. I know a man, a discreet man. Then, you need to disappear. A boarding house. I know one, run by a widow who minds her own business. You will be Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You will be from Ohio. You will not leave your room. We can't pay, Jack whispered. This one is on me. Herrera said, or rather, it is on Odessa. I owe her for a problem. She helped me with once, but that is all. I will get the doctor. You will stay quiet and pray they do not find you. The room was small. It was clean. It had a bed with a thick, soft mattress, a washstand with a porcelain bowl, and a window that looked out onto a quiet, dusty alley. To Marianne, it was a palace. The doctor was a small, nervous man with whiskey on his breath. He came in the night. He dug the bullet from Jack's saddle out of his thigh. It had been a clean graze, but the fabric from his trousers had been driven deep, and the wound was badly infected. The doctor cleaned it. He restitched the arm, his work neat and practiced. He gave Jack a small bottle of laudanum for the pain, and a look of pity for Marianne. Keep him clean, the doctor said, taking the judge's money. Keep him warm. If the fever don't break in 2 days, start praying. For 2 days, Marianne did not sleep. She was the one on watch. She was the nurse. She sat in a chair by the bed, listening to Jack's ragged, fevered breathing. She spooned water and broth into his mouth. She bathed his face with cool water, and she tended his wounds. The third night, the fever broke. She woke from a doze to find him looking at her. His eyes were clear. Hey, he whispered. She burst into tears, a flood of relief so profound it felt like grief. Hey, she cried, laughing, wiping her face. You're an awful patient, Jack Bishop. Sorry. He grinned. He was weak. He was so weak. Their time in that room was a fragile, stolen thing. It was an island in the middle of a war. The world was the 4 walls of that small room. He healed, slowly. He was a man made of tough, stubborn material. She bathed him. She had to. He could not stand. She washed the trail from his skin. She washed his hair, and she had to clean the wounds. It was a new intimacy. He was helpless. He, who had been her protector, was now in her care. She touched his body, not in passion, but in healing. She saw the map of his life, the old scars, the bullet wound in his arm, the angry, healing gash on his thigh. He was shy. He was embarrassed. This man who could kill, who could face down trackers, blushed when she had to wash his legs. I can do it, he'd mutter. Be quiet, she'd say, her voice soft but firm. You'll pull your stitches. Now hold still. They talked. They whispered in the dark. Confessions from 2 lives that had never known kindness. He told her about his horse, the Grulla, how he had found it wild. She told him. She told him about her mother, how she had loved the color yellow, how she had hummed when she baked bread. Small things, the pieces of a life before it had been stolen. One night, she was sitting by the window, looking at the slice of moon over the alley. Jack, she said. He murmured, half asleep. When this is over, if we get out, if the judge, if he helps, we'll get out, he said. I want to stay with you. He was quiet. He was not asleep. He was watching her, her silhouette against the window. Marianne, you don't owe me, not for any of this. I know, she said, turning to him. Her face was in shadow. I know I don't owe you. That's why I want to. I've never had a choice, not a real one. My whole life, I was sold. I was branded. I was used. And then I met you, and you gave me a choice. You told me I was worth more. You gave me the shotgun. You let me choose. She walked to the bed. She sat on the edge. I'm choosing, Jack, I'm choosing you. He reached out, his hand still weak, and took hers. His calloused fingers wrapped around hers. You always had that choice, Marianne, he said, his voice rough. You just get to make it now. He pulled her down. She lay beside him, her head on his good shoulder, and they slept, a real peaceful sleep. The peace lasted one more day. Word got out. It always gets out. A chambermaid who saw the bloody bandages, an orderly at the doctor's office who talked too much, a lawman on the cartel's payroll who saw Herrera's name on the boarding house register. They didn't come for Jack and Marianne. Not first. They came for the judge. It was just after midnight. Jack was sleeping. Marianne was awake. Her ears, now trained to danger, heard the shouting, the distant cry of fire. She went to the window. 2 streets over. The sky was orange. A building was burning. Jack, wake up. He was on his feet, his gun in his hand, before she had finished the sentence. He staggered, his leg weak. What is it? A fire, she said. A big one. He looked out the window. He knew. He knew the way a man on the run knows things. He knew the direction. That's Palace Avenue. That's Herrera's. It's a warning, Marianne whispered, her blood cold. For us? From them? No, Jack said. He was pulling on his boots, his movements frantic, clumsy. It's a message. For him. To silence him. Jack, no, you can't. You're not strong enough. I am, he said, strapping on his gun belt. He's the only chance we have. They're trying to burn our only hope. It's a trap. I don't care. He grabbed his shirt. Lock this door. Bar it. Put the chair under the knob. Do not open it. For anyone. Not even me. Not until I give the knock. 3 knocks, then 2. You understand? Jack. He grabbed her. He kissed her. It was a hard, fast, desperate kiss. Lock the door. He was gone. He ran. He limped. He staggered. But he ran. The fire was a beacon. It was Herrera's house, not his office. The cartel was thorough. The street was chaos. People in nightshirts, buckets of water, horses screaming. The fire was roaring. The whole 2nd floor was an inferno. Jack pushed through the crowd. He saw a man, his face black with soot, stumble out the front door. The judge, the man choked. He's still in there, his study. Jack didn't hesitate. He pulled his hat low, wrapped his wet kerchief around his face, and went in. He found Judge Herrera on the floor of his study, an overturned oil lamp beside him, the carpet in flames. He was unconscious, a gash on his head. He had been hit, then the fire was set. Jack threw the older man over his good shoulder. The pain in his leg, in his arm, was a white-hot scream. He didn't care. He was John Bishop. He was used to pain. He walked out of the fire. He walked out of the burning, collapsing house with the judge on his back, just as the roof caved in. He laid him on the street. Herrera coughed, his eyes opening. He saw the fire. He saw his home, his life, his books, all turning to ash. And he saw Jack, standing over him, a ghost covered in soot, bleeding through his bandages. Jack had earned his favor. The next morning, Herrera, his arm in a sling, his head bandaged, sat in a borrowed room at the hotel. He was not a weary man. He was a man reborn in fire. He was an angry man. They burned my books, he said to Jack, his voice a low, cold fury. They burned my wife's letters. They tried to kill me, to stop one girl from talking. He looked at Marianne. They are afraid of you, child? That is a powerful thing. He took a pen. They wanted to silence us. Instead, they have given us a voice. He began to write. He wrote fast, his hands sure. He drafted papers. He declared the brand on Marianne's hip not a contract, not a mark of ownership, but evidence. Evidence of a crime, evidence of kidnapping, of battery. of human trafficking. He issued a warrant for the arrest of Silas. He issued another for the John Doe trackers. He knew the warrants were paper, but the first paper, the one about the brand, that was law. "This," he said, handing the paper to Marianne. "This is your freedom. It says the territory of New Mexico recognizes you as a free woman. It says you are not property. It says any man who tries to collect you is in violation of the law." Marianne held the paper. Her hands were shaking. She was free. Hope. It was a dangerous, fragile thing. It filled the small boarding house room. "We can go," she whispered to Jack, her eyes shining. We can just go. California, like you said." "We can," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. He was healing. He was strong. I need provisions," he said. "For the ride, we can't leave like this." "I'll go," she said. "No," he said, his voice firm. "You stay. You rest. You're free. Let me. I'll be 1 hour. I'll get us food, real food, and a dress, a yellow one, like your mother." She cried. He held her. 1 hour, he said. "Lock the door." 3 knocks, then 2. He left. She locked the door. She barred it. She sat on the bed, holding the paper. She was free. She did not hear the footsteps in the hall. She did not hear the soft, scraping sound at the lock. The sniper had been patient. He had watched the fire from a distance. He had watched the judge. He had watched the boarding house. He had waited. The door burst open, the cheap lock splintering. It was not Jack. It was the man from the mesa, the weasel, the one who had run. Marianne screamed. She grabbed for the chair, for the shotgun, but she had been careless. She had been hopeful. The shotgun was in the corner. He was on her in a second. He was not strong, but he was fast, and he was fueled by a desperate, greedy rage. You bitch!" he hissed, his face a mask of fury. "You and your killer. You cost me. You cost me 3 men. You cost me my pay." She fought. She was not the girl from the dust. She clawed at his eyes. She need him. She screamed. He hit her. A brutal, backhand blow. The same one she had known her whole life. Her head snapped back, hitting the iron bedstead with a sickening crack. The world went gray. The paper fluttered from her hand. He hit her again. "You ain't free," he snarled. "You're just cargo." He bound her hands. He gagged her. He threw her, a sack of feed, over his shoulder. He went out the back, down the alley. He had 2 horses waiting. He threw her on one. He was not riding to Silas for a reward. Not anymore. He was riding for his life. He had failed. He had lost 3 men. He had let the girl and the killer go. Silas would kill him. The cartel would kill him. Unless he brought back the girl. Not for the reward, but to silence her. To prove his loyalty. He rode hard. Out of the city. East. Back toward the desolation. Back toward the mining town. He was taking her home. He was taking her back to the brothel to die. Jack was back in less than an hour. He had the provisions, a canvas sack heavy with beans, coffee and bacon. And he had a parcel, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. The yellow dress. He was whistling. A low, tuneless sound. He had not whistled in 10 years. He got to the room. He knocked. 3 times. Then 2. Silence. The whistling stopped. A cold, familiar dread. The kind he had lived with his whole life. Settled in his stomach. "Marianne?" he called. He knocked again. Harder. 3, then 2. "It's me. Open the door." He heard it. The silence. It was the loudest sound in the world. He put his shoulder to the door. It was a flimsy lock. He was not a man in a fever dream. He was a man who had his life back. And it was being stolen again. He hit the door. The wood splintered. He hit it again. The frame gave way. He stood in the doorway, the provisions dropping from his hand. The sack hit the floor with a dull thud. The room was ransacked. The chair was overturned. The bed was a mess of torn sheets. And the paper, Her Freedom, the one Judge Herrera had signed, it was on the floor, in the middle of the room, a single boot print stamped on it. He saw her, for a second, as he had first seen her, a heap of rags in the dust. Then he saw the wall, over the washstand, where the small, cracked mirror had been. Someone had used a fist to break the glass, and in the center, scrawled in a dark, brownish red, was a single, shaking line. Her blood, debt collected. Jack did not roar. He did not curse. He did not cry. All the heat, all the hope, all the new, fragile life, just went cold. It turned to ice. It turned to a quiet, clean, perfect purpose. He walked into the room. He picked up the paper. He smoothed the wrinkles, folded it carefully, and put it in his breast pocket, over his heart. He walked to the corner, where the shotgun, Odessa's shotgun, still leaned. He picked it up. He checked his own revolver, his own bandages. His leg was stiff. His arm ached. It did not matter. He was a killer. He had tried to stop. He had tried to be a new man, but the world would not let him. He was John T. Bishop, and he was going to collect a debt of his own. He rode the grulla. He rode it out of Santa Fe, not as a man running, but as a man hunting. He did not have to guess the direction. East, back toward the mining towns, back to Silas. The tracks were easy to follow. 2 horses stolen from a livery near the edge of town. The man was a fool. He was panicked. He was pushing the horses too hard. Jack, the best horseman Grady ever had, could read the story in the dirt. He was not just tracking a man. He was tracking a coward. He rode all night. The desert was a vast, silver, empty place under the moon. He did not stop for water. He did not stop for food. His wounds, which had been healing, were now just a dull, distant thrum. The cold purpose was stronger than the pain. He was a ghost on a fast horse, and he was gaining. The sun came up, a brutal white eye. It found him in the middle of an alkali flat. Ahead, he saw a dark shape, a dead horse. He rode up to it. It was a bay mare, one of the stolen horses. It was lying on its side, its legs stiff, its tongue black and swollen. It had been ridden to death. Its heart had burst. The weasel had killed it. Jack looked around. He saw the tracks. 1 set of tracks, 1 horse, now carrying 2 people. The man had transferred his saddle. He was now on the second horse, with Marianne. They were slower. He was faster. He kept riding. The sun beat on his back. A dust storm blew up in the afternoon. A wall of choking, brown grit. He rode into it. He did not stop. He tied his kerchief over his face and let the grulla have its head. The horse was an animal of the desert. It knew where to go. He was gaining. Marianne was in hell. The world was a jarring, painful, stinking thing. Her hands were bound in front of her, the rawhide cutting into the new skin. Her head throbbed from the blow. Her lip was split. Again, she tasted her own blood. She was on the horse, her back pressed against his chest. He was a small man, but he was all wiry, panicked strength. And he stank. He smelled of old sweat, of fear, of the whiskey on his breath. "He ain't coming for you," he hissed in her ear, his voice a dry rasp. "You get that? He ain't. He was just clearing his conscience. A man like that, a killer. He don't love. He just takes." She was silent. Her body ached. "He wanted a whore." The captor continued, his voice getting louder, as if he was trying to convince himself. "That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. And he got it from you. And now he's gone. He's probably halfway to California by now. He's free of you. I did him a favor." He laughed. A short, ugly, barking sound. Marianne was not the girl from the dust. She was not the girl who had cried in the dark. She was the woman who had held a gun. She was the woman who had stitched his arm. She was the woman who had been chosen. She turned her head, as much as the angle would allow. She looked at him, her eyes as cold and flat as the desert stone. "He's coming," she said. Her voice was a cracked whisper. "He ain't's comin'." The man sneered. "He's coming," she said again. "And he's going to kill you." The man's face tightened. He was afraid. She could feel the fear coming off him. She gathered the blood and spittle in her mouth. She turned her head, fast, and she spat. It was a thick, bloody mess, and it hit him square in the eye. He screamed, a sound of pure, feminine rage. He let go of the reins. He backhanded her. The blow was brutal. It sent a flash of white, blinding pain through her skull. She slumped forward, her head hanging, the world going gray. You branded bitch!" he shrieked, wiping his face, his hand trembling. Silas is he's gonna be so happy to see you. He's gonna take his time, and I'm gonna watch." Marianne did not pass out. She hung there, her body broken, but her mind was clear. She lifted her head. She looked at the man's hand, the one now holding the reins. It was shaking. "He's coming," she whispered again, to herself. "Hurry up, Jack." Jack knew this land. He had run through it. He knew the passes. He knew the water. He knew the man he was tracking was a fool, and a fool would take the shortest route. A fool would take the narrow canyon pass at Red Rock. It was a trap. It was a shortcut. And it was where Jack would wait. He pushed the grulla, the horse's lungs burning, its sides lathered. He got there with an hour of sun to spare. He rode the horse into a box canyon, gave it the last of his water. "Good boy," he whispered, patting its neck. "Wait for me." He took the shotgun. He took his revolver. He climbed. His leg was on fire. His arm was a useless, aching weight. He didn't care. He found his spot. High on a ledge, overlooking the narrow, winding pass. He was a sniper. He was a killer. He would end this. He waited. The sun was low, painting the rocks a deep, bloody red. He heard them, the clop, clop, clop of a single, exhausted horse. They came into view. The weasel, the captor. He was on the horse, and she was in front of him. A crumpled, broken thing. But she was alive. He could see her breathing. Jack raised the shotgun. He had a clean shot. He could end it. He could hit her. He couldn't take the shot, not with her in the way. He put the shotgun down. He drew his revolver. He stood up. "Finch," he called. His voice echoed. "Get off the horse." The captor, Finch, screamed. He yanked the horse's head, the animal rearing in terror. "Bishop, you're dead!" "Get off the horse," Jack said, his voice dead, flat. He was walking down the side of the canyon, his movement steady, his gun leveled. Finch panicked. He did the only thing a coward could do. He grabbed Marianne by the hair and threw her. He shoved her off the horse. A brutal, sideways motion. She landed in the dust, a heap of rags, her hands still tied. She did not cry out. Finch was fumbling for his gun. She's nothing. You can have her. I just want..." Jack fired. The shot was fast. It took Finch in the right shoulder. The gun flew from his hand. Finch screamed, a high, thin sound. He was not a fighter. He was not a killer. He was a weasel. He had a knife. He pulled it, and he ran. He ran at Jack. It was a stupid, desperate, animal charge. Jack was weak. His leg, his arm. He tried to raise the gun for a second shot. He was too slow. Finch hit him. He hit him like a sack of rocks. The two men went down, rolling in the red dust. It was not a duel. It was a brawl. It was fists and boots and choking. Finch was all wiry, panicked strength. He was screaming, crying, trying to bring the knife down. Jack blocked it. He got his good hand on Finch's wrist. The knife wavered, inches from his face. "You killed them!" Finch screamed, his face a mask of hate. "Get off me!" Jack grunted. Finch was stronger. He was desperate. He put his other hand on the knife. He pushed. Jack felt a sharp, cold, blinding pain. The knife slid into his side, just under the ribs. A deep, sick, burning cut. Jack's breath exploded from his lungs. The world went white. Finch laughed, a choking, triumphant sound. He raised the knife for the killing blow. Now, you die! Jack's other hand, his left hand, was not empty. He had not dropped his gun. He was a professional. He pressed the barrel of the revolver, not to Finch's head, but to his chest, right over his heart. Finch looked down. His eyes went wide. Jack pulled the trigger. The sound was flat, muffled. It was a thump. Finch's body went rigid. The knife fell from his hand. He looked at Jack, his eyes full of a strange, final surprise. He made a small, wet sound. He was dead. Jack shoved the body off him. It was heavy. He lay on his back, in the dust, the red sky spinning above him. He was bleeding. He was bleeding badly. He could feel the hot, wet gush. He looked for her. His vision was blurry. "Marianne," he whispered. "Jack!" Her scream was not a scream of terror. It was a scream of rage. She was on her feet. She was running to Finch's body. Her hands were still tied. She kicked the corpse. A single, furious, desperate kick. She saw the knife, the one that had been in Jack. She grabbed it. She was sawing at the rawhide, cursing, crying, her hands clumsy. The ropes fell away. She was at his side. "Jack, no, no!" He looked at her. Her face was a mess, swollen, bruised, her lips split. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You're safe," he whispered. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "No, you are not allowed to die." "Do you hear me?" She was ripping at his shirt. She saw the wound. It was bad. It was too much blood. "Help me," she said. "Get up." She got her shoulder under his good arm. She pulled. He screamed. He was a dead weight. "Get up, damn you," she cried. "Help me." He found his feet. He leaned on her. He was a dying man. She was a living, breathing fury. She dragged him, half carried him, to a small, muddy stream at the edge of the pass. She laid him down, his head in her lap. She was tearing strips from her shirt, the one from Odessa. She was pressing them into the wound. "You're not allowed," she whispered, her voice breaking. She was crying now, hot tears falling on his face, washing away the dust. I just found you. You can't leave me. Not now." She was kissing his dirt-smeared, sweaty, pale face. She was kissing his forehead, his cheeks, his lips. "You're not allowed." "I love you. Do you hear me? I love you." He looked at her. He tried to smile. "That's good," he whispered. And his eyes closed. Back in Santa Fe, Judge Herrera was not a weary man. He was a man of fire. He had a new office. He had a new purpose. He was signing a paper. It was an order, countersigned by the territorial governor. It was an investigation, an official, armed, funded investigation into the Santa Rita silver cartel and into a man named Silas, the girl's paper. He said to a U.S. Marshal, "The one that frees her." "Yes, sir," the Marshal said. We haven't found her. Or Bishop." "You will," Herrera said. "Find them, protect them, and give her this." He handed the Marshal the finalized, stamped paper. "She's a free woman. Marshal, make sure the world knows it." Jack woke to the smell of soap and sunlight. He was in a bed, a real bed. Not a boarding house, not a camp. The sheets were clean. They were soft. He was not in pain. He was just weak. He turned his head. The movement was slow. The room was simple. Adobe walls, a small wooden cross on the wall. A mission, a hospital. Marianne was there. She was asleep. She was in a chair, her head resting on the edge of the mattress, right beside his arm. Her face was clean. The bruises were fading. Her split lip was healing. Her hand was on the bed. Her fingers were curled, tight, around a piece of his clean shirt. She was holding onto him. Even in her sleep, he did not move. He did not wake her. He was too weak. He just watched her. He watched her breathe. He watched the sunlight coming through the window, light up her hair. He was alive. She was here. It was enough. They rode north. Weeks later, the gruella was strong. Jack was healing. The scar on his side was a puckered, angry-looking thing. But it was closed. They had a new mare, a calm-eyed sorrel. They had a new sack of provisions. And they had a paper, signed and sealed, in Jack's breast pocket. They were riding into the high hills. The desert was gone. This was new land. Green, rolling hills, stands of pine, a clean, sharp wind. They came to a valley. In the middle of it, by a running stream, was an old, abandoned ranch. The house was stone, but the roof was caved in. The corral was just a memory of posts. It's a ruin, Marianne said. It's a start, Jack said. They made camp, their first night, not in the ruin, but under the stars. The sky was a vast, deep, velvet black, studded with so many stars it looked like spilled salt. The fire was crackling. Jack was tending the horses. Marianne stood by the fire. She was not wearing the men's trousers. She was wearing a dress, a simple, yellow dress. He had bought it, after all. She looked at him. She smiled. It was not the broken smile of the trail. It was not the desperate smile of the boarding house. It was her. She put her hands on the buttons of the dress. She started to undo them. A tease. "Hurry up," she whispered. The same words. But the voice was not mechanical. It was not dead. It was a woman's voice, full of love and life and a little bit of mischief. Jack stood. He crossed the small space between them. He stopped her hands. He put his own calloused, scarred hands over hers. He pulled her into his arms. He buried his face in her hair. She smelled of soap and wood smoke and her. He was not shaking. He was solid. "Not tonight," he whispered. She pulled back, a look of confusion on her face. He smiled. He touched her cheek. "Tonight," he said, his voice rough. "I hold you like you're everything I ever prayed for." And he did. He held her. He just held her. They stood in the firelight, under the stars, in the shadow of their new, broken home. And they were not running. They were, finally, still. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment and let us know. Be sure to subscribe to From Wild West for more stories like this. We look forward to hearing your thoughts, so please share them in English.